Hi, I'm Mike Clevin. I go by the Unprofessor lately. Big Skookum, and also Skookum1, numeral 1, in blog space for many years, and Wikipedia, and the Canadian Mountain Encyclopedia, and other places. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about myself. No, I was listening to the news, and Mr. Horgan's talk about how it was unfortunate what had happened with the pipeline. Well, he was the one that went ahead with the LNG project now, wasn't he? And so he's saying that, you know, the talk that he's making is platitudinous, just like Mr. Trudeau's. It's not talking to the central issue, of which there are no treaties, right? And he's talking around the points being made by people saying, which is the Wet'suwet'en and all the other First Nations and their supporters, such as myself, that this law is that they are sovereign and they have a right to say no. And they say no. And they say there can never be a pipeline built. And yet they still come on wanting to talk about, what was the term he used, Horgan? Process or something. That wasn't it. As though there was a way for them to just have to make concessions. No, it's not how it works. It's not how it works. Not when you have troops on their land and you've done what you've done for a project that you knew could never be approved. But the media bath on this, and you know, I'd done an earlier vlog on, you know, how the Canadian Yellow Jackets are so off base. The media bath on this and the way it's distorting the French Yellow Vest is that the natives are primitive and will have to be dealt with, you know, in the long run, paid off somehow, some kind of accommodation as to route made. But the real issue is that we're funding a dying industry. Because to keep the banks financing of all the projects going and the companies that have on the table wanting their profits, including the 1% plus Chinese ownership that this pipeline has, which induces the China-FIPA treaty. The things Mr. Harper did that Mr. Trudeau is just fine with, because he's another globalist, and just as conservative liberalism is just a name. You know, it's always meant freewheeling capitalism, only with a human face. But it's not a very human face when it does, you know, what things it's doing, and then it goes after the people involved, defaming them and disparaging them, and continuing to wipe out and ignore their history. Anyways, so I'm very disappointed in British Columbia. Many of us are. And it's not just Native people who are upset. And so my American friend, We Are Change, I'm sorry buddy, I don't know your name. You're totally wrong about the Canadian Yellow Vest. So you should get a hold of me, man. We'll have a little chat, okay, about what they're up to and what they say, and versus what the French Yellow Vests say. Because the French Yellow Vests, if they knew about Wet'suwet'en and all the various sovereign nations within British Columbia that have never signed a treaty with the Crown, who all don't even consider themselves Canadian and won't vote in the referendum, which is why the vote in those areas went FBTP, because only the rednecks voted, and the realtors and the corporate capitalists and the social services, and I guess all the authorities too, that, you know, the colonial mechanism is the other part of the vote in those areas, you know, and there is no local referenda in BC, there is no self-constitution. The municipalities are separate from the reserves so as to not have democracy. It's two separated systems. It's because British Columbia would never sign treaties and wants Ottawa to sign them. I blame Britain for this. I've even suggested that maybe send Prince William back as an intermediary, or to preside over the creation of an assembly of sovereign nations, which would include, since there is no crown title, therefore the Parliament of British Columbia has no right to have the exclusive right to incorporate municipal acts over perhaps municipalities that might want to incorporate themselves as local sovereignties like Swiss cantons. I say it's time we devolve Canada. I say it's time we go, okay, and there'll be a way of working it out with the US. And even with the oil guys, look at the guys in the Canadian Yellow Vest. Look, you guys, there's way more work in converting to the new economy that will save your kids' lives. So rather than hate and despise them, I'm going to try and reach out to those guys like I'm doing right now and say, look buddies, you know, think about this. Look what the French Yellow Vests are doing, and they want all those referenda, right? And would you want somebody building this piece of shit through your backyard if you owned it and didn't want it to happen, and you own a family, you own it for thousands of years? Literally. Oh, because they're brown they don't matter, because they're red they don't matter, because they're natives they don't matter. That woman in Regina didn't matter because she was native and she was a woman. And the Prime Minister mansplaining over the top of the angry woman in Kamloops was disgraceful for a man who calls himself a feminist. Woo! Nasty. Nasty. I've never seen such a display of hypocrisy. Instead of listening to what she had to say and answering, he devolved, and it was the wrong word, he spun and he avoided the point and talked in circles. And all the while, the native youth, I mean the men, 18, 19, 20, they were in the back row watching him from the back row. Watch him watch those videos again. Watch the kids in the back row watching him. And watch other people in the crowd around the native woman. They all feel for them. They all know it's true. We all know it's true. We knew it with the white paper in 1970. We knew it with the Forest Act when it gave all the land claims land to the forest industry in 1976. We knew it in 1983. We knew it when the NDP went and reinvested in all the forest industry expansion in the 90s. Instead of investing in new technology and new directions for British Columbia, which actually W.A.C. Bennett was a visionary and wanted. But no, between Ottawa and the United States, we were just to be kept as hewers of wood and drawers of water. And that's all the Union Party can see. It's all the Business Party wants, because they already owe their souls, and all of us, to our foreign masters. So it's a question of how much can we do a revolution of our own, other than what the First Nations are manifesting and will manifest. Mr. Trudeau, you've met your match, buddy. Oh, man. I know them like you don't, man. So, and this is a bigger problem than France. Now, Alberta, you know, okay, well, you know, I think that Alberta separatist thing is and all of these Canadian Yellow Vests is actually a CIA action to destabilize Canada to make possible the acquisition of British Columbia and Alberta. Well, I'm fine with them taking Alberta, you know. They're going to wind up with highly multi-ethnic cities, you know, Edmonton, Calgary, and Fort Mac also, you know, are all really heavily multi-ethnic now. And also they get their quarter of Alaska. But out here west of the Rockies, where there is no crown title, I say there is no more Canada. The terms of union were broken, you know. In many ways, I could get into it and do in other vlogs, my history vlogs. Canada has used armed force against a rural area of British Columbia to enforce a foreign-owned corporation's plan for a pipeline across sovereign territory that nation has long denied and said will not happen. And here you are, Mr. Horgan, and don't slough it off and blame it on Mr. Trudeau. He's just doing what any autocrat would, and he's trying to be his daddy. You know, just watch me. Oh yeah, well, just watch the First Nations, Mr. Trudeau, as to what you're faced with now. Right? You've touched off the division of the Great Red North from this long, thin white line that is the Trans-Canada Corridor. It's not only white now anymore, though, the Great White North. That's the interesting part. All my Chinese acquaintances and others, you know, and most of the younger ones, other than the brats I just had a conflict with in the town square, basically, you know, that they're fully aware of how unjust this country is, and that they got screwed from the referendum, right? Anyway, I tell them about France. I tell them there's life more than here in suburban Canada. This is the parking lot of, I don't know what the name of this square is, Haney Plaza or something. And it's kind of discount stores, and this is a discount supermarket, not a supermarket, furniture store, Habitat for Humanity. Anyways, it's an old shopping mall. Our shopping plaza was Safeway or whatever it was here in the old days. I'm moving out of Maple Ridge into the canyon. In a couple of weeks, my backdrop will be the mountains of the Fraser Canyon, and maybe the Fraser River and Anderson River and the other creeks around there. I think I'm by Stoyoma Creek. Stoyoma Creek is what I'm next to at Canyon Alpine, and in Mount Stoyoma. So hopefully I get up on top of Mount Stoyoma. I think I might be able to get away with using an ATV on off-road. I think that's okay. I don't need a driver's license for that. So anyways, we're living in a country that has no soul. There's an old joke about Canada, but it's not just a joke. We have the heart of a banker and the soul of an accountant. It's all the bottom line. But it's also denial of history, and the Ayn Randian thing that it's all about money. It's all about yourself and the right to profit. No, you have to maintain the land, and this is the travesty that both of the big parties, and the NDP are just a reflection of the industrial economy that the working class were served up here. They weren't raised as an educated working class. Their kids are becoming that now, and so they can't live in the industrial towns anymore, resource industrial towns. They have to move to the big cities. So the cultural divide in Canada is splitting over and over and over in many ways. But I'm just afflicted now because I had an encounter with I'll just call them the youth of my town. That was unpleasant, and they shouldn't have had to be, you know. I was just going to play music and got insulted and I got a little out of control. So I'm calmed down now, but it's part of this process of seeing I'm living in a society where that kind of element that attacks me there, the same element that in their time when they get the chance, they'll run through Vancouver and break windows and riot after a hockey game. I don't know whether they'll ever riot for politics. I don't know if they'll ever wake up that way. I don't know whether the Canadians can actually wake up the way France has. But we don't have an easy way to get at our government because of the vast distances involved. And the people who need our support are the First Nations, you know. The roughnecks are only in it for themselves. You know, if those guys wake up and say, okay, they start feeding the poor, when they pick up the poor on the way across the country, pick up the poor. I say this to the Canadian, yes, pick up the poor and offer to take the elderly to Parliament Hill with you and demand better benefits, demand a universal basic income, demand citizens' initiative referendum, tear apart the banks, tear apart the media cartels, have citizens' referendums in each province to decide, especially in British Columbia, on issues like sovereignty locally. Yeah, these aren't revolutionaries. I am, but nobody will listen to me. I'm only an old white man, no teeth. Gets laughed at by the suburban kids raised on television and daycare and video games and web media. So I don't know. Future Shock's hard to take. I don't know. Future Shock video 6, I guess this is. This is about the 6th one I've done on this topic. I read that book in 1970. I could speed read by that point. I have a bad idea to learn. It wasn't a good idea to learn speed reading, I think. I don't read in depth. But the whole concept of Future Shock, I've lived with it all that time since. It was already happening then, and now it's just like it's a roller coaster that's just getting faster and faster by the day, including the childhood's end that I just encountered. It reminds me of that Arthur C. Clarke novel, Childhood's End, what just happened. But so does this surreal situation with the governments talking in circles around clearly wrong actions by a government illegally, and that the whole of British Columbia history is a dark lie, especially the last few decades. Of what happened was the NDP grew up out of the CCF, who were all for the resource industrial unions because that was the way the province had been directed since the Great War, when it was a prohibition money province. So now it's a marijuana money province too, and all that money is coming above ground and still there, the underground. But it's becoming surreal for me. It's nothing like the place I was raised in and the daily life. And here I am talking on a new device that can help me show you where I'm standing, you know. And here's the store that I'm headed in to see what they might have, even though I have no money on my pocket at all. I'm going shopping with no money. So the Buddha says, you know, possessions bring suffering. I lost a GoPro on January 2nd. I was taking it back to Metrotown Shopping Center. I left it on the train at Metrotown Station. Duh. But, you know, Santa Claus gave me a gift and then Santa Claus take it away, okay? But, you know, possessions bring suffering. I can't be bothered worrying about it. I can hope to earn it back somehow. Good fortune. Somebody out there hears me saying this, says, Mike, I'm going to help you out. But, you know, strange world we live in, Master Jack. And I'm living in one of the strangest parts of British Columbia. Is the farther edge of the frontier politically. It's backwards. It's like things that happen in Europe happen in BC 20 years later. Things that happen in the US happen here 10 years later. Or happen concurrently, like Occupy is like a bad echoes of the US. We live under the shadow of manifest destiny. I can deal with it. And excess. That means I get to go back to California again, where part of my family is from. And I like Nova Scotia. I like my friends there. But there's no mobility for a poor person in the current system. There's lots of money, mobility if you're rich. But, you know, there used to be cheap rail travel. There's not anymore. But this is suburban Canada, and right behind me is old suburbia, you know, nice streets and stuff, you know. I'm going to go in an old supermarket right now and shop for things from somewhere else that are cheaper than you get at Walmart, even though I have not a dime in my pocket. But I heard Mr. Horgan's comments, and I just wanted to comment on the absurdity of them, how he was every bit as absurd as what, and invasive as what Mr. Trudeau was doing in Kamloops. And it just proves to me that the NDP have never been serious about land claims. All the IWA and those guys, they supported Bennett in '83 with the deal with Jack Monroe. Although that also had to do with the threat of U.S. invasion. But in 79, they were all happy and voted for him because in 76, he'd given all the land set aside for the natives to the forest industry so they could clear cut it all. And look where we are now, with the bug kill everywhere because of them. It's actually because of them. And climate change and everything else. And now we've had more and the river's dying. And well, there's more coming, folks. It doesn't have to do what we're doing. We've triggered things off that we can't stop. So watch for great storms coming. This is January and it's still well above freezing and it's evening, it's sunset, you know. And I don't have to have my jacket done. My head's not cold. It's going to be one hell of a summer. And probably, I don't know what's going to happen for the spring, but it'll be a hot summer. So those kids who are just jeering at me and throwing things at me, they don't know what's coming. I do. I do. I don't pity anybody no more. Anybody who won't listen, I don't pity them anymore. I just don't pity them. You know, you can try and tell somebody the truth. If they don't want to hear it, well, then they weren't meant to hear it and they can't hear it. Then they're therefore let the problem resolve itself when the time comes. You might lose it. You might go on the problem in the time, but you did what you could to try and do things by trying to talk to them. I don't know. I live in a resource frontier. I'm a man of letters, poet. I know my classics are not just in Greek and Roman either. Philologist, philosopher, ancient historian, cosmologist, astrophysicist. Not in a technical sense, because I've read all fields and know everything. I've seen everything, almost. Not from various perspectives, but the thing about a poor man is because you have no possessions, you have a unique perspective. It's like being a rich man at the top. You have a unique perspective. And I live in a place where poor people are undervalued and insulted and have things thrown at them. Whereas in native society and other cultures in India, you wouldn't be jeered at. You'd be respected, especially if you were going to play music. So anyways, I better shut this off and go shop. The Unprofessor, Skookum 1, Big Skookum, Mike Clevin signing off.